Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nate Wyckoff, film critic and comedian for HorrorNews.net. I am super excited for this very special episode of Cult and Classic Podcast because our two guest panelists today are Mary Jo Pehl and Bridget Nelson from Mystery Science Theater 3000 and RIFFTRAX. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Very good.
Hello.
This is a perfect time to say that if you join our Patreon at patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast, you get to see their lovely faces and my haggard backdrop. So we have an awesome lineup of two movies to talk about today. We've got a theme going here, which is relationships are murder. Although I don't think anybody is actually murdered in either of these two movies on screen, so we will get right to it. The first one is 1993's So I Married an Axe Murderer with Mike Myers. We pair it with the positively true adventures of an alleged Texas cheerleader killing mom. That is the longest title I have found, next to a couple of Czech films that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. And but first, we're going to get right to it with So I Married an Axe Murderer. I think a lot of our listeners have seen this film, and this film's from 1993. It is Mike Myers' medium successful venture right after Wayne's World, and we'll talk about it. I'm going to go into the plot real quick for those who haven't seen it. As always, there are spoilers in this podcast. If you're interested in seeing the movie, I don't think spoilers ruin it, especially after you hear what we have to say one way or the other.
Well, and especially 30 years later. I mean,
Yeah, sorry, come on.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's not, both these films are from 1993, so if it's out of the theater, you missed your chance. This one, the plot is that Mike Myers, there's a lot to unpack here, so I'll do the best I can. Mike Myers is a beat poet in 90s San Francisco who somehow meets wonderful women and then breaks it off with them because he thinks something is wrong with them. He's basically a commitment-phobe, if that is really a thing. And he ends up falling for this woman who he's like, you know what, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to do it. We're going to get married. And then he becomes convinced that she is actually an axe murderer who's killed 3 previous husbands. That's pretty much the plot. And if you think that you're going to hear Mike Myers do like his evil voice or anything that he did 10 times in Cat in the Hat years later, you're right. He does all those things. And you will totally hear it. So I had actually never seen this movie. I guess I'm in the minority. Mary Jo, you said you hadn't seen it either. Bridget,
Correct.
Have you seen this movie?
I have not. I mean, I watched it now because I have to.
Thank God.
I have not.
I have to.
It was contractually obligated at that
It was
point.
an assignment by Teacher
Exactly.
Nate.
Teacher Nate, that's right.
I
Teacher
copied
Nate.
Mary Jo's watching of it.
There's a lot. I think most of our panelists on Cult and Classic Podcast at one point in time wish they had that card they could raise, be like, I'm going to cash this in and take so-and-so's notes. So going into it, Mary Jo, what was your expectation with this movie?
I expected it would be tedious. I'm not. Can I just jump in? Should I just jump in?
Right in? Jump right in.
Because I'm not a Mike Myers fan. I never saw what the thing was about him. I think I saw one of the Austin Powers movies years ago, and it was amusing in parts, but I just never grooved to him. So I thought it would be tedious, and I think it was. I felt like it was just a platform for him, like a lot of those SNL actors. They just get a platform to do their...
There's a lot of them in this movie, in cameos as well.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of... It's just a platform for him to do his shtick, and I didn't find him very appealing or sympathetic. And I think what I took away from the movie is that he's paranoid. He's commitment phobe and he's paranoid. Like all the women that he's ever been with, there's something about them that he's paranoid specifically about. And then this one is sort of the apex. That was my understanding.
I think there's a lot in there that is true. And also, for those who've seen this movie and don't really know any backstory, there's a lot of rumors and backstory going on with tension between the director and original screenwriter, credited screenwriter, and Mike Myers on this project. And I don't know that Mike Myers has really weighed in on this, but everyone else has. So we'll get to that. Bridget, what did you think going into this movie, and what was your outcome experience?
Well, I'm going to just step right up to the ladies' tee and swing. What's the deal with his Operation Man haircut?
I was going to say that too. I was going to say, Mary Jo, his appeal must not be his haircut in this.
Well,
I mean,
there are angles where I thought it was a wig, because you don't see a scalp exactly.
Yeah, it's
but
like a side-parted Prince Valiant. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
And when you saw his bare butt is when I went, oh my God, he's the operation guy with that haircut.
It was totally true.
White, fishy body and disgusting.
So I guess that there's a scene, I guess that scene, he drops his towel and you see his butt and it's supposed to be comedic. And I mean, I commend it for having only nudity in the male, you know.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Which is a nice.
That's true.
But I guess they filmed it twice, once with a long towel for airline flights, because apparently that was still a concern. And so there's actually those 2 copies of the movie floating around. And I honestly, the only reason I knew that is because when I was digging on this film, I found a thread, I don't think it was Reddit, but it was some horrible thread site, no offense Reddit, that people were mad, like, where's the green towel scene? Which is apparently the long towel that he had. And they're like, well, it's not in the theater cut of the movie. That's when it covered his butt. And I guess somebody was upset about that.
Somebody would be. Now that you get to hear about everybody's grievances. Did someone make like a TikTok video of crying of it? the
green towel. You can't see behind me, but it's a wall of green towel effigies. I was the poster.
I took a lot of notes on this movie, but that was my main takeaway was his haircut annoyed me so much.
Well, so I'll commend Mike Myers on this. I don't mind Mike Myers. I had no real preference one way or the other. I was not a particularly big Austin Powers fan in general, but I just thought of him as one of the SNL cast gone by. But I did appreciate his portrayal of his dad, Stuart, in this movie, his main character's dad. But here's the thing, it is so over the top, but all I could think of was how come his dad has way better hair than he does? Because his dad has this great like silver gray swoop, and I'm like, I would love if my hair would do that. And then they gave Mike Myers, who's supposed to be the cool, hip, younger guy, who's an age in this movie between 25 and 46, I don't know. But yeah, I was like, and I guess he went over 3 hours of prosthetics and makeup to look like that character. And I'm like, well,
come on, just put some baby powder on your head and like it's great. You put a couple lines, like it was so, all that to do your favorite impression.
Right. And that's what I'm talking about using it as a platform for your theater exercises. I'm sure independently, the impersonation of his father is really funny. I loved the brogue, and there were some funny things I found amusing, but it just felt so self-indulgent to do both parts. And I also feel like it was kind of on the backs of really appealing performers like Nancy Travis. She's really appealing. But she's just sort of used as a step stool for him. And I resist that.
Yeah, I agree, Mary Jo. So she's just there, and then he's gonna just like do all his stuff around her. Okay, now I'm gonna do this Irish brogue, and now I'm gonna do this. And like, I can't believe the guy gets millions of dollars to do his whole movie based on like a thing, Mary Jo, you and I would just goof around about, and then he gets to just have a full-blown movie. Everyone has to like, you know, set up their day so he can do his little shticks, and it's not in the way of the movie. To me, it seemed like there was a script there about a paranoid, there's all sorts of script stuff. And then you could tell that this stuff was just like shoved in there. I will do it. I will do my funny impression.
No, I felt like that too. Like a director pardon me, I can't recall who directed it, but like the director felt compelled to let the camera still keep running, that it was shoehorned in there.
Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
Thomas. I don't. This is going to be very offensive to Thomas. If he is still with us, Thomas. It's either Schlamm or Schlamme. It's SCHLAMME.
Right.
But he did a lot of. He's done a lot of political stuff. He did The West Wing. He produced that rather. He's directed a lot of TV shows since. And the backstory for those, well, I guess for those that know as well as those that don't know, because I'm going to say it, is that there were rumors floating around when this movie came out that Mike Myers was a nightmare to work with. He was a prima donna. He'd lock himself in his trailer until he got his way. And it turns out, well, from what we can piece together, it's probably somewhere in the middle, because the scriptwriter of this film, who's credited the scriptwriter, is Robbie Fox. Robbie Fox apparently wrote a film that was more, as you were saying, Bridget, more based on a character that was paranoid versus sort of this fear of commitment, which I think is kind of a fallacy, but it's in every single rom-com movie ever.
Rom-com. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about some guy named Ron.
Rom-com loves the commitment phobe.
Rom-com's movie.
Yeah, no. So he's and Robbie Fox he wrote he wrote some winners. He wrote In the Army Now with Pauly Shore. He wrote the recent-ish Granddaddy Daycare, because Daddy Daycare 1 and 2 weren't enough.
Of course.
But, so he wrote the script, and then apparently Mike Myers and his friend from England came in and did heavy rewrites. And then he pushed and said, we want credit for myself and my friend on this new script draft, and Robbie Fox can have a story by and a scrreenplay. And Robbie Fox
I
said
had an
no.
insight, is what you're saying. This is all coming back to me, right? And that
Absolutely.
I had an insight.
You used your magic lens. But what's interesting is, I don't know, I was trying to decide which I would have liked better if it had been to this original version that is theorized about, where Robbie Fox writes this character that's sort of a paranoid guy who just can't stick with a woman, and he finally takes the plunge, and then the paranoia turns out to be true, or he thinks it's true. Or this movie,
Annie Hall. You would write Annie Hall.
Well, and that's exactly what I was saying. I was like, this is Annie Hall. In fact, they originally wanted Mr. Mary, My Daughter, to play the lead character.
What? Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Wait, am I understanding you? They wanted Woody Allen to play,
which
the Mike,
makes zero sense to me. Zero sense to me.
But I thought it was a vehicle for Mike Myers.
See, and that's what now my assumption is that productions or the producers said, no, we want Mike Myers. We need a vehicle for him. But the script originally had called for someone like, why am I blanking on his name, even though you just said it? I have a
Woody Allen.
Against Woody Allen right
now.
Yeah,
and I didn't mean to sound so accusatory. I just couldn't wrap my head around like how that could be a Woody Allen film. And I hadn't made the sort of, Annie Hall sort of parallel.
Well, if this blows your mind even more, they wanted Sharon Stone to play Nancy's role, to play the role of Harriet, the main love interest. And Sharon Stone apparently was down for it, but she wanted to play dual roles. She wanted to play herself, Harriet, and who ends up being, spoiler alert, the crazy serial killing sister, Rose, as well.
That's a great idea.
It is a great idea, but the studio said no, so she pulled out.
No, doesn't want Sharon Stone in their movie. How dumb are you?
But of course they said no, because there can only be one actor playing dual roles.
I know, and it has to be the man. And
yes,
but here's the reality, though. I don't think Sharon Stone at this time opposite Mike Myers, I think that would have blown the lid wide open. You're like, nope, can't happen. Couldn't possibly happen unless she's blind, and having a blind woman play two blind sisters is not going to work.
There's your screenplay, Nate. Do it.
Boom. It's up on Kickstarter right now. Blind Axe Murdering Sisters. It's going to be gold.
So this was before he had Elizabeth Hurley. This is before Austin Powers.
This is before. This is this is 93, and I think
have Elizabeth Hurley playing against him, and okay.
And
but also, I feel like Nancy. Okay, Nancy Travis has much more of the pairing doesn't sound right to me with Sharon Stone, because she's kind of got that edge, that sophisticated edge. Nancy Travis has more of a girl next door, which plays plays with the, is she an axe murderer or is she not?
Sharon Stone is a woman. And also Sharon Stone, she could play a killer. It's sort of like, I think Nancy Travis does a good job being occasionally scary a little bit when we think she's a serial killer, maybe because she has this fear of him running off, so she's extra clingy, which we don't really know. Clingy is another problematic word, but
right.
she's like following him, and we're like, oh no, she is a killer, or oh yay, she is a killer, and then we don't really know why until it's because she thinks everyone she's married has run off, when it turns out her sister has killed them and left fake notes claiming they ran off.
Right.
Her sister, by the way, listeners, is Amanda Plummer, who has an amazing voice for like animated characters. That's what I always think of her as, because she has sort of that Jennifer Tilly, hi, sort of raspy voice. Sure. And her sister, I think one of the issues is that when it comes up that she's the killer, you're like, oh, that makes sense, because they gave her horrible teeth. And I don't know if that's like, I didn't understand that choice, because she clearly is like made to look weird and frumpy and have like really bad teeth. And she has this really odd scene when she first meets Mike Myers' character, where he's just slept with Nancy's character for the first time. And
which I take issue with, if you don't mind me.
Please.
Don't have them sleep together right away. Then the romance is gone. Like, movies are supposed to be, you wait and wait and wait until they finally get together, and then the curtains blow, and we don't have to see it. We don't have to see Mike Myers in any kind of bed situation.
Right, but maybe they
movies are supposed to go.
Maybe they had to, Bridget, because they saw that there was no chemistry so there was nowhere for it to go. There was no way to build it. So it's just like, let's get that out of the way, because there's no charm, there's no chemistry there. I don't know.
Exactly. I'm trying to say something smart. Exactly, Mary Jo. That's exactly what happens. You know, so, we've seen enough bad movies. We know how they do this.
We know how this is done.
Okay, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Continue on.
You're totally fine. I actually don't remember exactly what I was saying, but I did have a point that I wanted to come back to, which is when I was thinking of how this movie, because I think if I compare this movie to other 90s vehicles for SNL characters and performers, I think it falls somewhere in the middle. It's not the worst. It's watchable, but it is such a product of its time. I mean, the music is, I am shocked that Lisa Loeb was not on this soundtrack. I am downright shocked.
Yeah, it's shocking.
And
that one horrible song is in it too that I hate so much. I like the one. Which one?
There She Goes.
No, I like that song.
I love that song.
Did you like it the first, second, third, fourth, or I think fifth time they played it in this movie?
Yeah, right.
I know.
But it's also about, isn't it about heroin or cocaine?
Oh,
so
no.
I think, yeah, it's a
it was
drug
originally
song.
by the Laws, I think, right?
Yeah.
And this was a cover by the Boo Radleys.
Oh, okay. I never know that kind of stuff.
Well, they never play past the first verse, so it doesn't really.
Right.
And it's very charming. Like, it's very subversive because it's so poppy and charming.
Yeah. I agree with you. And this movie could have gotten going in 6 minutes. It took forever to get to the plot. Like, I was so bored. Can it, like, come on, just be done. And I just have this note that I want to read. Hate, hate, hate. Why? Too long. I don't know.
Thank you for illuminating our conversation.
You know, I think Roger Ebert had a similar thing. I'm just kind of playing off of his note. That you might want to kind of hear that, along with who would fall in love with him. Very
I have to play a clip here, because this is my biggest problem with the movie, because there's like the sort of 90s I don't think it's hit over the head misogynist, as say a lot of horror movies and other movies that I do in this podcast all the time tend to be, or a lot of older romantic films where it's like, well, he slapped me, so he must love me. It's not that kind of misogynist, but it is this like undercurrent of, how did this 4-foot-tall man with an Operation Guy haircut have all of these wonderful women over and over again, and he's the one that disconnects? And there isn't like a warning group that they put together, like he has hypnotic powers, don't go near him. Like, how did that not happen? But this is the thing most bothers me, is that they're in San Francisco. They all have these massive apartments, and his job is to be a beat poet. Let's listen to the first poem that he does in this movie, of several, which is basically the same poem over and over again with some
right.
Down. I think I know what this one is. I think I wrote it down. I was so annoyed.
It's called Women, Women, I think, or Woman, Woman, and here it is. And it's got this nice like jazz quartet that's throughout the movie.
The quartet was great. I wanted more of the quartet.
They exist. They're good. They're a good band. I forget what they're called.
Before you play it, so he's at open stages or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then so he goes, and then his quartet comes, and they split the money from what? From where?
Exactly. They apparently in 1993. So in 1993 in San Francisco, all you needed to have a large living space and I guess enough money to eat, or at least for coffee and cigarettes, is to exist and be under the age of 50. Well, and now it's about $3.6 million for a shoebox.
Yeah, and he has this groovy car and finds parking like Doris Day parking everywhere he goes.
He does.
And,
it's Hartman Gia.
It is.
It's a great car.
It is a beautiful car. And he drives down that big hill and there's never anyone there. It's just a big hill. I'm like, oh, this is an episode of Full House without people. But no, it's not the case.
Well, they broke up in front of the Full House, so that was good.
They did.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I don't know. Is it actually the house? Because it looks a lot like it.
Well, it's on that road. Like that's
every
AT&T commercial.
I just kept, every time they kept showing shots of the city, I was just like, everywhere you look. That's all I kept thinking in my head. This is Mike Myers' character's first poem.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our own Mr. Charlie McKenzie.
Woman! Whoa, man! Whoa, man! She was a thief, you gotta believe. She stole my heart and my cat. Betty, Judy, Josie, and those hot pussy cats. They make me horny, Saturday morning. Girls of cartoons won't leave me in ruins. I want to be Betty's Barney. Hey Jane, get me off this crazy thing called love.
And then he blows out a votive candle.
Yeah.
And I love
He's Jerry Lewis. He's Jerry Lewis.
The implication here is shocking, that when they go, our very own, as though people are traveling the world to do an open mic at a massive coffee shop. And also, this is just totally beside the point, but if there was one to begin with, the opening shot is a long shot of, you don't see who's carrying it, but presumably a barista or waitstaff person carrying this large cappuccino in like a bowl to Mike Myers way in the back of this packed, it looks like a Portland pizzeria turned coffee house kind of thing. I'd love it there, but I can't get the tickets, I guess. And it I thought they were drinking out of it the whole time because it's right up to the camera. And then they hand it to him and I'm like, were they drinking his drink? Because that to me would have been the best joke, hands down. Right. And then I get it. And he does the first line of the movie is him doing this insanely stilted shtick of
so bad.
It's like, oh, excuse me, I ordered the large. And I'm not making it up. That's how he delivers that line. And then people around him laugh. And I'm like, that is the most dad joke that I'm pretty sure no dad has done it since their dad did it.
He does the thing, Nathan, he does the thing which I hate, where you set up your own comedy thingy and then you make fun of your own comedy thingy, and and on and it goes. And then the whole coffee shtick thing, Mary Jo, we just did that movie Amanda and the Alien, and they were really into isn't the coffee culture just crazy?
And by the way, guys and listeners, if you haven't, it's Nicole Eggert in Amanda and the Alien. I tried to watch this movie so many times, and I'd never even made it through the first 30 minutes until Mary Jo and Bridget riffed it on RIFFTRAX.
There you go.
Well, thank you.
Thanks to you guys, I finished that film, which I don't know if I'm grateful for or not, but it was very funny. It does have Michael
Well,
Dorn in it,
thanks.
so listen for Michael Dorn a lot. But yeah, you guys were very funny. And yeah,
Well, thank you.
I thought of that because it has that whole like, oh, it's the 90s. It's cool to be in a coffee shop and get coffee because that's what people do is coffee. And I'm like, this could have been anywhere with anything. And it's sort of like in the coffee shop where he's doing this, it's sort of like in Flashdance, where I don't know if you have seen that or if you remember when the club where she's dancing, it's like they do
Way
everything.
overproduced. How
They do
could you?
everything there? It's like there's a cabaret, there's a sexy dance.
Water comes down.
There's a comedian at one point. I'm like, where is this?
I know,
Right.
because all of us comedians of the 90s would have really liked to get a job at any of those places that had lighting and
Yeah, lighting, please. Yeah. And then she's got a whole water setup. Come on.
But her life sucks, and yeah, then that's not the top for her. Yeah, but that was the sort of thing. I'm like, this is a setup for a movie that I would guiltily enjoy because I'm like, oh look, a big coffee shop, especially since we're in quarantine, shelter in place. I'm like, wow, look at all that, and then we get that. And then his friend, who is a police officer, because that has to be the case for the plot to work, is played by Thomas, or what's his? I forget. I'm dropping the ball here.
it was funny. I love that
Yeah,
whole
Anthony LaPaglia.
LaPaglia.
There it is.
There you go. There's the correct
Who I
pronunciation.
love. I love him.
He's fantastic. And actually,
Anything.
thank you. I need to let you know though that it's my podcast. So people's names are how I say them. I'm just kidding.
Well, I appreciate you mispronouncing my name, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate
Mary
it.
Jo Pehl? Did I?
You said Pell.
Damn it. You know what? I know it's Pehl because I actually
Liar.
listen. I do.
He's a
because I
liar.
read your IMDb. And so it specifically says in the trivia that your last name is pronounced Pehl, which I remember thinking, I don't think that's trivia. I think that's how you say your name. But it's spelled P-E-H-L. And I'm
really enjoying putting you on the spot right now.
I am too. The hole that he's digging.
Yeah, I'm listening.
It is
Uh-huh.
I am. The worst part is that I literally, you're lucky I didn't call you Mary Jo Pearl, because that's been in my brain forever. And I just have to say, I will never not laugh to myself and think, for whatever reason throughout the week, some scenario will make me think of the scenes that you two did together on Mystery Science Theater in one of the later seasons when you guys are in ancient Rome. And and it's like, I mean,
I saw that.
I think of that. Oh, I've seen them all. And don't worry, it's the fanboying comes later. I don't have to creep you out with it now, but the slut, I mean, what moment between you two is like, it just, I know that joke's been done before, but that's literally where it's in my head. So every time I hear that word, even if I should be taking offense, my first thing in my brain is slut. I mean, what? I'm like, huh?
Well, and you bring up an interesting point when you say that. So like, and as I was watching this, I was thinking about it, about how, it's fun to tear something like this apart and everything, but like, ultimately, you write comedy, it's of the moment, almost always. You write it, you hope it works. If it was the 90s and I was your average person and I went to see this movie on Saturday night and I went and had a pizza, I wouldn't have been mad or anything. You just go like, yeah, But since we were in the business at the time, I remember someone saying, oh, I saw it. And at the beginning, there was this really cool scene where this cup of coffee. And I remember at the time just going like, oh, I have to sit here and listen to this person tell me about a Mike Myers movie.
No, right.
And I want money to make my funny joke into a whole movie.
Right. Especially when that particular scene, I don't know if it was a single shot. I mean, they do it very well, but it's like, come on, let's talk Goodfellas. So please don't even with
and
your
it doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie is a very traditionally shot film. There's no real, it's static camera, which is fine. I'd rather people do static camera than fail at another kind of camera, but it just doesn't feel like the movie. It felt like something completely different.
Just get to
That-
the funny. Just
Right.
get to the funny.
I think
but-
that's a really good point. Yes.
Thank you.
And
But skip the sex meat scene
The-
where he's doing sex things to the meat. I just
that was bizarre. So apparently, in that scene, because a lot of this, as we would expect, I didn't find any confirmation of this, but I don't think I need it. I think it's pretty obvious that a lot of what you're probably finding distasteful are the times when they essentially let Mike Myers just riff and do his own ad lib, which occasionally I think that they leave it on way too long. Even if something would work, we then get him like naked walking up the stairs for 3 minutes. Like it's just
Right
a
on.
weird, it's just a weird thing where I'm like, oh, the movie stops, so I watched this.
right.
totally. And don't
and-
you think, MJ, it's kind of like, and do people call you Nate?
Nate is perfect.
Just that's what directors are for. So let a funny director direct you, because you're Mike Myers. People like you. You're not funny. You have shticks and things that, like, if I knew you and hung out with you, we'd be laughing about a lot of the similar things and be friends and everything. But like, let a good director direct you.
Right. Trust a director. And also, if I were the other actors, like that kind of thing would drive me crazy. Like, oh, we're all in service to your shtick, and now this has to go on, and I'm waiting for you to finish your thing, and maybe you want to redo it. So that would really annoy me.
I think you're right. Like, yeah, if you had to watch him go up the steps nude again, but the
So to
supporting,
speak.
the supporting funny people in this were all funny. Like,
I think my favorite
like the Michael
parts-
Richards
Yeah,
scene. That was
yes.
kind of funny.
Yeah. And I thought his mom did a really good job too.
Brenda
She-
Fricker.
Yes,
Yeah.
she did a great job. And she's got, I actually felt like they gave her more than I expected of his mother. She's got little bits where she, sort of makes out with his friend, Anthony LaPaglia. Is that correct?
That's
It's
my
cute.
understanding. Yes.
Okay. And I loved his bits with his boss. And
Alan Arkin.
Alan Arkin. And
I
Alan
love,
Arkin, those are my
oh.
favorite parts, because his boss is this super sweet, nice, caring police chief, and all Anthony's character wants him to be is like from Starsky and Hutch, screaming at him, yelling at him, and throwing him. And so he tries to play this character, and it made me happy. And those scenes felt, I don't know if those were added later or if those were part of the original different script, because I do feel like there's a disconnect. When Mike Myers isn't on screen, it does feel like a different movie.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. They feel more authentic and based in something. And Alan Arkin, please, I love him so bad.
He's
Oh.
always funny and
He's
never
amazing.
not
He
funny.
also steals the scene a little bit by being so good. It's just so natural. It's very clear
Yeah.
that he is one of the all-time professionals. So when he does come in, it's sort of impossible, because I guess he wasn't actually accredited in the original film. He
Oh.
was just a cameo. And supposedly he joined the film along with a lot of other people. Stephen Wright, of course, and Phil Hartman is in here when he was alive, and Michael Richards, as opposed to when he was dead. I don't know why I added that. Of course he was alive.
Appreciate the clarification.
Right. I'm like, I'd still cast him. And I guess it's because they wanted to work with Mike Myers. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not sure where that information came from. But
Well,
that
he was
is
hot
floating
as can
around.
be.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
I would love to work with them now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I
Phil
tried to
Hartman
pitch
is
him
funny.
Cat in the Hat too, and it just didn't fly with
Right.
anyone.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. So the original plot apparently came about, and I'm trying to find the quote here that I found in it from an interview. But I guess Robin Fox met with either I wish I knew this, but either the producer.
But it doesn't end up mattering because it's be funny. Just
The
make
reason is because the original,
Right.
I guess the original idea is the scriptwriter got together with a producer or director, somebody, and said, trying to pitch ideas to each other. And it came down to the fact that they both were having terrible time with women relationships. And the quote is something along the lines of, it seems like that women are just out to destroy us. And that became almost a little more problematic for me, because I'm like, wait, I wonder what was changed in the script, because that's a very dated idea for a movie like this.
Wow.
And I guess I don't know how to feel about that. It changed me, because originally I was thinking, I was like, I wonder what the script and film would have been like in its original incarnation. And then after reading that, I'm like, that's a telling sign to me, because that makes me think that it's not going to be a good movie in any way, shape, or form. So it makes me wonder what the purpose for rewriting these scenes was, beyond giving more of a vehicle and more room for Mike Myers to do his thing.
I think that was the only reason.
Probably.
That's what I imagine.
Probably
Just accommodating all that and trying to make it fit some sort of through line. Like, I'm not saying it's successful, but just trying to force that in there. Like, okay, I guess we, retrofit it to accommodate all this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so this is another thing. This is the list of people that were considered for Mike Myers' role. Apparently, the lead was written for Chevy Chase. And again, this is 1993. I don't really see the ages of the people that they're considering working for what they ended up with. Maybe it was radically different. But Chevy Chase, then Woody Allen, Albert Brooks, and then Martin Short. And I guess Albert Brooks and Martin Short looked at it, but they didn't like the character. So, which I think is also kind of telling, because Martin Short pretty much only plays nice guys or crazy people, right? And sometimes crazy nice guys. And I think that sort of is telling of this character is sort of undeserving, it feels like. Like, he doesn't,
totally.
I don't understand where he gets this I guess it's success, but this comfort
it was
level.
in my well-researched notes.
Well, I think if it was Martin Short or Albert Brooks, it would have been it just feels like it would be so much different. Like, Bridget, a little while ago, you said the movie should have gotten going in 6 minutes. And with either of those two, I feel like it would have, either because of their approach, or maybe they would have tweaked it along the way. But it doesn't feel like an Albert Brooks movie at all. Like, that would be a fundamental shift for me, that in my estimation.
It feels almost like the kind of movie you could have dropped any hot comic property in the way it is now, and let them do a bit. Like, it could have been an early Jim Carrey thing where they could have dropped him in. Mary Jo, that's not appropriate.
No,
make that
no,
face.
I know. Did you see me like?
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. We all have different opinions, perhaps, but I think it feels accurate to me, because really it's a character who is so self-important that the women in his life are secondary characters. He's attaining them, and there's enough empty space in the script for him to make hilarious faces or whatever and do some physical comedy. And it just felt like that.
Could you give me an example of one of the hilarious faces?
So there aren't any. Here's the thing about Mike Myers that kind of confused me a little bit in this, is he actually acts a little in this movie, which kind of surprised me. And I will give him, Mary Jo's got this, like, so join the Patreon, because you're going to miss half of the subtext of this entire conversation.
Citations, please.
Well,
footnotes.
He doesn't add, I will amend it to say he doesn't add sort of an intentional comic levity when he's like professing his love and things. Like, he has what I imagine is his natural face on. Whereas at other times he doesn't. Like, when he's wooing her, his entire wooing process is about like shrinking his neck down into his shoulders, which is like his thing.
Yeah.
And like opening his mouth really wide, which he does as Austin Powers as well, and so on. And it feels like, well, I guess what it comes down to is this movie actually feels like a more traditional romantic comedy that they tagged on a 10-minute axe murder chase on at the end, because there is no axe murdering in the film. Like, we're set up with, hey, there's a crazy axe murder apparently, and then in the middle we know that she clearly is somehow connected, because she has artifacts from the previously dead people we've learned about in her apartment. And then at the end it turns out to be her sister, which is why they're in the apartment, I guess. I would probably not enshrine my dead loved ones, things who I think just left me in my apartment. That's a relatively unhealthy thing to do, I think. But she dedicates a lot of her massive apartment to hanging things from her past loved ones on
Yeah.
the wall.
I think you bring up a really good point, is that it plods along, if you will, and then the whole denouement and the climax just are, oh, we got to get to this, and it didn't make sense to me. Like nothing, it did not follow for me.
Can we talk about his friend Tony, the cop, chartering a plane to reach their honeymoon getaway that is flown by Stephen Wright? Now, this is my favorite part of the movie, probably just because I like watching Stephen Wright confuse people around him. And that's the intent of this scene. But again, I'm like, oh, this scene is just a vehicle for Stephen Wright to do 5 minutes. And they must cut back 3 or 4 times, probably 3 times to him, when really it's like a one-shot scene. And I guess it's like it comes so close to the end, and it's a big cameo that they dedicate a few minutes to. And then at the end, we've got this, like, I didn't understand. I guess that's the thing. It doesn't make sense, right?
But
like
we didn't need any more funny.
No,
Yeah.
like you just needed to get to the moment and get done, you know, like, and here's the
Same
part
with
that
this
also
Charles
drove me-
Grodin cameo. Why, you're wasting Charles Grodin on him,
Right.
and
Yeah.
he's funny. But that could have happened like in Can I come into your car? No. Next scene, they're driving down the road.
Right. And
Get-
that's the thing.
get
I kept
going.
waiting for a joke in that scene because he's so good. His voice is so good. And then I'm like, oh, I get the joke after the second time. He says, no, that's the joke. And then he said 2 or 3 more times. And then like, there's no payoff to that joke after that. And he is just driving in the car. Like they could have done anything. Like he could have been singing along to the radio in his monotone. It just could have done something. Hell,
Yeah,
use
the
There She
payoff-
Goes once again. Like it just could have wrapped back. And I just felt like they were missed opportunities. And can we talk about the dinner scene where Mike Myers gets the phone call at the honeymoon place when they've just sat down to dinner, and he's told by his cop friend that she's actually the killer?
Yes, but first, can we address the fact that at the anniversary party, her hair, she looks like Beethoven.
She does. Here's the thing though, I will credit, I'm like, at least I like the dress. I don't know, maybe I'm out of fashion. I like the dress because the rest of the movie, the 90s fashion is so rough.
Yes, I have that in my notes. I was going to ask Mary Jo, what did
Yes.
you think of the wedding dress?
I can't remember it. Oh, wait, I can't remember it.
It was
I
the one
think
that
I
wasn't
thought,
with Hartman.
Mhm.
I think I thought it was, I can't remember. I think I thought it was pretty. Uh-oh.
It kind of had a it was pretty, and it was an off-white, and it was pretty, but
Was it a gunny sack style?
no, but it had, the 80s puff had gone away, and so it was
Yeah.
thin, and it flattered her figure, and it had kind of a little thing in the back. I don't know if it was a hood or not, but I did note that it was pretty.
Yeah, I liked
So,
it.
All right,
Nancy
Nate,
Travis
you can go back
singing
to
was
your,
not my
your
favorite
little
part,
podcast or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, Bridget and I are doing a sub podcast.
I asked you guys to keep it to a tight 15. Yeah, no, the dress that she wore at the end, I liked, and it was a departure from what had, like, she wore it.
Oh, she was in Mandarin collar. She had a Mandarin collar.
Yes,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and previously everyone, except for Mike Myers, had just raided Kurt Cobain's like storage shed. And just said, it's the 90s, let's bring it in. There are no shapes. Everyone is a jellyfish in denim and plaid. And it was a nice scene, but then they get to the table, and I don't know how much money the characters are supposed to have paid to be there, but if my entire dinner at a fancy place was hijacked by a couple of people's wedding anniversary or like wedding celebration,
right.
the entire restaurant erupts and carries them upstairs to presumably have sex in a bedroom, which is so medieval. They just like huck them in off a chair, like, get at it, rabbits.
A
And then-
rattan chair, which would never have been in there anyway.
And like, it was the weirdest, like, I'm like, is no one, like, it was when all sanity went away. Like you guys just did an awesome riff of the Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, the 1991 Redgrave version. And there's that bit at the end, and I guess I don't know if it's a drag show or what it is, but when she goes up and the Looney Tunes sister, trying to be conscientious of her mental illness, is...
Who is? You are right now?
I am.
Oh, okay.
By saying Looney
By
Tunes,
saying
the
Looney
Looney
Tunes.
Tunes sister.
I love the Looney
Okay.
Tunes. Yeah, no, she's clearly got issues, and don't we all? she gets up on stage and she's doing her bit, and then she leaves the stage and just all hell breaks loose. It's like that,
Right.
you know, the
And the people
choreographer
are
died
doing all
moment
that.
in Rocky Horror.
La,
We get the fishbowl lens and everyone's moving around, and there's someone in like baby clothes who's mocking her, and I'm like, I don't think he has a leg to stand on. But that's that moment in this movie. Everything just goes out the window, and in like 45 seconds, they're out of the restaurant, which they haven't gotten any food at. They get worked on the dance that they were called to do. They get thrown on a chair, thrown in their room, and then Nancy's character gets thrown locked in a closet, and then the crazy sister is there, and then the axe battle ensues. Like, that is literally, I feel like it's like 2 minutes, and there is so much there that is the most action in the entire film, and it's slammed into like 2 minutes, and I'm literally just holding onto the couch going, what am I watching? How much is left of this? And then it ends.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. And just to circle back, I think Amanda Plummer is a really excellent actor.
I agree.
There have been a couple of things, which I can't recall, that she's been in where she's been amazing, but I feel, you know, I guess it was a gig.
Pulp Fiction, and she's been in The Fisher King.
What were you saying, Mary Jo? Sorry. It's a gig?
Yeah, I mean, I just like her as an actor. She's an acquired taste for a lot of roles, but I like her.
Well, I actually kind of thought, before like scrutinizing the posters, I actually thought she was going to be the love interest.
I did too.
And that's what I thought. And so when she just shows up in a couple of scenes as the crazy sister, and she has these great line, like a couple of nice lines that are sort of that crazy cable guy moment where it's like, is this funny or is this terrifying? I'm not sure yet. And yet. And like, she sketches Mike Myers when she first meets him, like for 2 seconds at a breakfast table, and then that's never brought up. I'm like, Chekhov has so many guns lying across the floor here, that are never picked up.
I think there were gaps in this movie, to be honest. I think there were, you know, flaws.
You're loud. So I'm gonna call it on this, and we're gonna wrap up. I'm gonna ask you guys here the question I ask everybody on this show, starting with you, Bridget. Who would you recommend So I Married an Axe Murderer to, and why?
I know I would show it to aspiring comedy writers, and they could watch the movie and note what is still funny, because it's funny. Whether it's,
that's a good
like,
exercise.
For example, Phil Hartman, the stuff he says, I was not to my taste, but he does a thing with his face. Funny, because he's funny. So I would recommend it to just people who are writing scripts, or mostly people just wanting to write funny things. Note what's funny and what is just fluff of the time. I think that would be a fun practice.
And I think that's interesting that you said that too. And just, I want to mention it too, because I love Phil Hartman. He's one of, like, his voice like made me want to get into entertainment. It was so fun. And I was so sad when he passed away. And the bit they have him do is so
killed.
blue for the character. Huh?
He was killed.
I know. I know.
But I think
here's why I say that, because every time I say it, I get mad at Andy Dick, and I don't want to go on a rant about Andy Dick. Okay. But I saved that for an entire episode called "Why I'm Frustrated with Andy Dick." And but no, it is true. He was killed by his girlfriend at the time, who was in a drug-induced state. And Andy Dick apparently gave her the drugs. So that's why you stay away from drugs, kids, and you don't talk to Andy Dick. So, but I agree that was another case where I thought it was a missed opportunity. I don't think what they gave Phil Hartman to say was funny, and it was about having like sex with a prison bitch's eye socket, like to be direct, and it just doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. And also, it was not so insanely out the window that it was funny. And so it was just another case where I'm like, oh, Phil Hartman. I'm like, wait for this, honey. And I'm like, okay, that was Phil Hartman. All right. And there was no payoff for that. But I think you're right, Bridget. I think that's a really good way to approach this film, is what's funny because it's legitimately funny. And
his face is funny. He made funny faces.
Absolutely. I think, and I'm going to go next because it's my show, not yours. And I'm going to say that I would recommend this probably to people who they just couldn't get enough sort of 90s SNL comedy. I think that it's fine for what it is at its time, but I think there's better. I mean, I'd rather watch something that at least is weird. I would rather watch Coneheads or something if I'm going to watch this kind of skit-based comedy that's blown up to a feature. But it is a classic for many people. But I think that when you watch it again, you're going to, Mary Jo's face, when you watch it again, I think that you're going to be surprised at how much doesn't hold up. Last but definitely not least, Mary Jo Pehl. Who would you recommend So I Married an Axe Murderer to, and why?
Well, I think we need another podcast to examine the meaning of classic, because I would go to the mat for that one. I'd probably recommend this to my sister-in-law, who thinks that this stuff is so funny. He's so funny. Have you seen it? It's so funny. You haven't seen it, you're a comedian, but it's so funny. So my sister-in-law.
It's like that copy of like, I'm just going to pick on Paula Abdul, but like in 1992, you get a Paula Abdul cassette tape from someone's friend who came to your birthday party, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. And then you're like, here, you can have this, and you hand it to your younger sibling, and they're like, yay, an animated dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's sort of like what this you're suggesting with this movie. And I think that that's accurate. We know there are people who like this movie. They're not going to think about it. They're not going to put any thought or depth to the problematic.
And I'm not going to get into an argument with them about it. Like, okay.
Right, Mary Jo, where you just go like, oh, well, I'm going to have to check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds good.
It's like, yeah, maybe I'll watch it one day if somebody asks me to be in a podcast nobody's heard of. And then you have to watch it. So,
you know, Casablanca, Mary Jo, as you know, with a classic, you know what's going on by the time that plane goes around and then they show the map. It's 2 minutes in, and like an amazing setup for the best movie ever is done.
Right, right. So economical and so powerful.
Yes, and I think Humphrey Bogart would have been good in this movie.
I think he might have been in this movie in a cameo that I didn't remember because he didn't have any good lines. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with the next film, The Positively True Adventures of an Alleged Texas Cheerleader Killing Mom. Okay. Hey, Cult and Classic crew, friends and fiends of the pod, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Nate, I don't have any money, and if I did, I'd be spending it on cool things like buttons and custom trading cards and zines that are unique and made each week by the Cult and Classic podcast family. And guess what? You can do both of those things at once. You can support cultandclassicpodcast.com and get awesome swag like buttons and custom trading cards that are printed on actual trading card stock by actual trading card printers and autographed by the artist, and also zines like classic issues of Rearted with comics and illustrations and interviews, as well as brand new Cult and Classic Podcast family publications that are brand new, so you'll get them first in line. These are awesome, awesome things that you can get just by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can get videos of our episodes, so you can see all our lovely shining faces, as well as exclusive content like extra episodes, film reviews, book reviews, and things like commentary by us on our short films, which you'll also be able to see. If you want to pay a little more, $5 a month per se, US, then you get an awesome autographed custom trading card. These are official, printed at the same place that prints every other trading card you've ever bought, and they're autographed by the artist. These are exclusively for Cult and Classic Podcast and inspired by our episodes. You can't get them anywhere else except through us. Only $5 a month, you get it shipped right to you. Shipping is free. If you pay $10 a month, if you are a true drinker of the Kool-Aid for cultandclassicpodcast.com, then you will get the trading card, access to all of the content that is exclusive to Patreon members, and you will get a brand new zine every month, whether it's a classic copy of Rearted zine with interviews, comics, art, all sorts of cool stuff, or brand new Cult and Classic Podcast family publications. Those will get sent straight to your door. Plus, there's usually extras like pins, stickers, all sorts of cool stuff. So you're doing two great things. You are spending money on awesome swag, and you are supporting Cult and Classic Podcast. I know it's tough right now in the pandemic. If you can do it, join us at Cult and Classic Podcast Patreon. If you can't, why don't you recommend it to a friend? We all have those rich friends, and they can spread it around a little more. I'm just gonna say it. All right, thank you so much. And as always, Cult and Classic Podcast loves you. And we are back with Mary Jo Pehl and Bridget Nelson. This movie is, the title is so long, and I think, I'm just gonna guess that maybe that's why it's not as well remembered as some other films, because I personally think this film is pretty strong. We're gonna talk about it. Starring Holly Hunter and Phoebe Bridgers, this is the positively true adventures of an alleged Texas cheerleader killing mom. This is an HBO television movie based on the true story of a woman named Wanda Holloway, who was really interested in getting her daughter in. I think they were actually in like junior high, on the eighth grade, the cheerleading squad in Texas. Was, by the way, I don't understand. They guess they elect cheerleading squad members. I never had this at my schools. Apparently we didn't have enough money to throw at insane things like that. And she tries to get her ex-husband's brother to put out a hit on and have this competing cheerleader's mother and the competing cheerleader killed, so her daughter will have a spot and on the team. And it sort of escalates where the brother-in-law is like, I'm not gonna, he doesn't even try to do it. He ends up working for the major crimes to sort of try and get her on tape saying that she'll do this. And they did, and then they took it to trial, and there was a mistrial, and that's where this movie ends, is when they're awaiting an appeal. And we'll get into what actually happened, because that's really interesting. But so Holly Hunter in this movie, I'm gonna say right off, is at her top. I think she is phenomenal in this film. The nuances she gives this character, it's very much for people who haven't seen or heard of this movie, it's kind of, I think it's a more serious take, but still dark comedy take of like the I, Tonya vibe, with Margot Robbie of recent, where it's based on the Tonya Harding case, where it's like, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, it's kind of a satire, but it also uses the facts. And in this case, some of the footage is kind of mixed in with the film. And it goes back and forth in time, and it sort of treats Holly Hunter's character's TV interviews, documentary, as a framing story for this. So it starts with her, and then it goes to the story, and then it ends sort of with the framing story as she's still talking to people, kind of explaining. It's a weird movie, but I think that it's absolutely worth a watch. Mary Jo, I know you're super excited about this. I am too. What was your expectation going in? Had you seen it before?
I don't think I had, and yet, I don't know. Don't listen to me. And yet I was like, it struck some chords, like, wait a minute. I loved that. I thought that framing device was really ingenious. And that is Richard Schiff as the faux documentary producer. And I love him. He appears later on camera, but that's his voice you hear. And I just thought the setup just was perfect. And she's so good in it. She's so chilling and ruthless with this facade of Texasness, and she can turn on the smile. And in Texas, you know, that the football culture and the cheerleading culture are huge. Like, you know, I lived in Texas for a while and was familiar with the whole football thing. I mean, it's intense. And then the whole cheerleading thing, and it's a wild story.
And Bridget, you think you might have seen this in the past, you mentioned?
Well, before I say anything, I would just like to say that I am very, very glad. Because I'm just not sure if I had ever actually seen one, and I try to watch as many of hers as I can, but sometimes I just can't. And so I have to watch this one to make sure that I really do understand what Holly Hunter is.
You are a genius. Your solo show for Broadway. Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter.
Exactly. That's it right there. And everyone's going to go expecting Holly Hunter. They'll get you. And
fantastic. No matter what she does, she's just good. Anyway, no, I hadn't seen it. I was having babies in 1993. I had a baby in 1993, my oldest son. And
that's a long labor.
Yes, so look at these movies of today were, you know, kind of at the end of where your life is your own. And so I have always wanted to see this one. So I saved it and watched it on a Saturday night, like, as, you know, my movie that I watched that night. So it was really fun. And like I said, I really do like Holly Hunter quite a bit.
Well, she's fantastic. She's from Georgia, right? And this movie gives her a chance to just go full drawl. Like,
Oh my
Sometimes
God.
I don't even know what she's saying, but I understand what she means.
Yeah, totally.
She's so good. And it's all in this tiny package of a person. Like there's scenes where she's walking away and you kind of go, oh, she's so little.
Just-
I know.
Yes.
The car door goes like above her head.
On that Wagoneer, by the way,
Yeah.
very classic.
Yeah.
Jeep Wagoneer, really nice.
And
I
love
would do
both
that. Would you rather have the Carmen Ghia or the Jeep Wagoneer?
Carmen Ghia.
Carmen Ghia.
Yeah, me too. I think it's probably safer, even though they're both death traps. But anyway, I digress.
Well, I love Beau Bridges too. He can do no wrong in my book. And the scenes when they're in the car discussing it feels pretty unscripted. Like I think they
Yeah.
run a little long. They kind of rehash the same material, but the energy behind it is so, genuine or authentic. And I don't know if they memorized all that. It felt kind of non-scripted.
I think it was from the tape.
Oh, of
That would've been
course.
interesting.
Derp.
I didn't know that. I do know that in the actual, like in the proceedings, they talk about that change from him actually like wearing a wire and doing the conversation to being much shorter. It's like a day, where in the movie it feels like many days. So I don't know if that's the case. They might have been trying to work that in, because they do have a lot of neat tricks where they'll use like TV footage of people interviewing either Wanda or other people
Yeah.
from the case, and they'll cut to, instead of cutting to the real Wanda Holloway, they'll cut to Holly Hunter doing her thing, and they'll use the same video effect, and it's great. And it
Okay,
looks,
so I have a question about that then. How does that go into time then? How does that, not that this movie needs to be, seen for all time, but like, I didn't know that. And so in some ways, does that still work then? Like they're cutting this in, well, I didn't notice it or know that. Does that matter? Or could you have written it better to further
Right.
your story or make funnier jokes or?
Oh,
that's a good
Yeah.
question. I mean, I think, well, because when I was watching this, the thing that did pop into my head was I, Tonya, not because they're the same, but because it's trying to do, I think, a similar thing, make a dark
Right.
comedy out of a real true crime event where they're like, well, nobody died, so we can do this. And it's sort of where that one is based off of very loosely, like Tonya Harding's like memoir. This felt like it was based, and it says it's based off like the court transcripts and interviews and things. And I do feel like that's the difference, right? We get these two different movies, one that has a lot more freedom with presentation because it doesn't try and stick. And this one felt like it did try and stick. Like I actually felt like I was being informed as I was watching this.
wow. Right. Right.
And that's why I went and if it didn't work, I wouldn't have bothered to scour the net for Wikipedia and and read through this. And it's and I don't know if it's more effective. I'm a history buff, so I kind of liked it, but I do think that as you said, Mary Jo, it does have some extra space. There's some extra time where like I get it. Like there was a little bit of a long time between when he actually starts getting tapes on her and they actually go to arrest her. And while I figured that's probably realistic, right? They're trying to build up enough evidence. I'm like, we as the audience know. And if it wasn't for their acting chops, it would have been painful actually probably to have those extra 15 minutes.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And as I was listening to Bridget, I was trying to figure out, is it because I'm so enamored with Holly Hunter that she just carries this? And so I just kind of overlooked like the framing device or the gaps in it. I'm just thinking about that.
Right. Is it better to just write a movie script, or is it important that you use this stuff? I don't know.
But I think maybe that's what I liked about it, is playing around with the format, because it's the experimenting with it.
I thought the casting across the board was so good. Like the daughter was just so extremely regular that it really works. Instead of, I think, a Hollywood casting, we're like, let's make sure, so we get the teens in on this. She's some cute little thing. And not that she wasn't a fine looking, but she was very regular.
Yes.
Totally.
And I think that was important, that this is all about this regular girl who just really kind of didn't even care after a while.
Right, with this overpowering mother, and then the mom of the other cheerleader, I think they play her really nicely because they're really economical in the way that she's got a good heart and a good soul, but it's not that over the top, you know, fried green tomatoes, heart of gold way.
Good versus evil.
Right, she's just very simple, and they don't use her. They use her well. It's not over the top.
And then you're talking about the character of in the other mom, right? Is Verna Heath, and she's played by Elizabeth Ruscio, Ruscio. I'm looking to you, Mary Jo.
Ruscio, I think Ruscio.
She who does a great job. They do an interesting thing with her too, and kind of with everyone in this movie, where I sort of feel like, of course, no one else is being accused of trying to solicit a murder, but they all have these little bits of things, which we probably all do if we were to watch tapes of ourselves, where we're like, ooh, that's not the best light, right? Like the way this film ends, one of the last scenes is Verna Heath sitting in the stands alone in a darkened football arena, telling her daughter to do the routine, the cheerleading routine again. And at first the band is there practicing too. And then the band stops, the lights go off, and you hear her go from the top or again from the start. And you're like, man, that is, and then it just made me rewind to when she's talking, the mom is talking about Holly Hunter's character. She's like, she's all about the promotion. And that's why, basically why her kid isn't going to succeed. And that's why I push you about the skill, all about the skill. So you have the skill succeed. And I'm like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't push our kids across, like to that extent across the way. Cause then it started to call back, you know, man, we don't get a lot of her, but they don't let anybody off the hook, which is kind of a nice, you know, it also means they don't drop anything.
That's a good way to put it,
constantly checking back with characters and giving us these little bits. Beau Bridges, as you said, my experience with Beau Bridges was knowing his brother and watching him as the dad in The Wizard, which is not a great representation probably of his skill. And in this, I was kind of blown away because he plays this good old boy, right, who's trying to get his life on track on paper. And then he goes home and he yells at his wife who has mental illness.
Oh yeah, that was tough to watch.
And it's hard to watch. And I have to say, you're talking about the Southern, the Texas thing. Part of my family is in Mississippi, Alabama, and the mannerisms had me like pressed into the couch. Like when in the beginning, it's one of the early scenes, Holly Hunter's calling her ex-husband's character to get him to pay for like rulers with the daughter's name on it, so she'll get nominated so they can give them away. And like,
which I thought was brilliant. She's
on the phone with him and she snaps her fingers down low with the big acrylic nails down low to get the daughter to come over, so she's going to use her on the phone. And I'm like, I jumped off the couch a little bit because I'm like, oh my God, like, do I have to, where am I going? Who's calling me? Like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, no, it's the movie. I can relax. Like it was that ingrained.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about it, that slice of life, because that is what happens when you're in a situation like that. The kids coming home, the husband's there, the ex-husband's on the phone, she's got scheming to do, you know, it's just all happening at the same time.
Click, 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 and I think, what?
I was just going to ask you, about Beau Bridges, because I know that you do like him.
I love him.
Yes,
I thought he was great. He's great in Norma Ray. Like, he's so touching in Norma Ray. And what's the other one? The Fabulous Baker Boys. He's terrific in.
And in Norma Ray, he's, you know, the same kind of character in a way. From well, I don't know if it's the same kind of character, but
yeah, in Norma Ray, he just feels more well-meaning and not really understanding Norma Ray's quest, you know, but still really earnest and supportive. And in this,
she's the husband, right? Or he's the husband?
Yeah.
When she just goes, "You want the dishes clean here?" And she squirts him in the sink, and she's walking around the kitchen. Right?
I've forgotten that. You have such a much better memory than I do. Yes.
Oh, I don't. But that's them, right? That's that dynamic. So yeah, same kind of like things aren't going well, but yeah. All right.
Well, and he's sort of, I think I think what you raised is a good point. He's perfect kind of as a foil to maybe not so much in intent or character, because they both have like this undercurrent of greed and like needing a little more. But he plays a really good opposition to Holly Hunter's character, because they both can carry a monologue in this in these characters. And like Beau Bridges has a couple, especially when we first see him. He's on like it's not an oil rig, but it's a refinery or something. And he's talking to his friend who's his partner in Christ, I think he says, or he's his Christ coach or whatever. He says some phrase like that, you know, to say help get his life on track. And he's got a list of things written down, and he's going over them with them. And you're like, oh, this sweet kind of bumbling man. And then you see this other side of him with his wife, played by
Susie Kurtz.
Yes.
And she's phenomenal in this. At first I was like, why did they cast her? Because this is such a small role. And then it does have a little bit more meat to it as it goes on, because she ends up doing the sort of, you know, the Nixon White House reveal, you know, she's like, no, this isn't it. This isn't the truth. And it's sort of, I don't know, I guess a story like this where you have such problematic characters and faulty antagonists and protagonists, one of the things that has to happen for it to work is, to keep us interested, is you sort of have to like them in certain ways. And I found that even though Holly Hunter's, you know, portrayal of Wanda Holloway is chilling, as you said, especially when she hears something she doesn't like, the first reaction isn't usually to snap, it's to stare. And that was chilling. And then she comes back with something. And
I'm doing it right now, Nate.
You are. I'm trying to block you behind my microphone because I can't handle the scrutiny. But yeah, she does it, and it's just but I also found her very charismatic. Like, I'm like, oh, this is the kind of woman that if I saw her every other day at Target or whatever, yeah, I'd be like, that's a funny lady. You know what I mean? Like this.
Oh yeah, she murdered the person, but we want her on our committee next year.
Exactly.
Totally.
like I want her behind me for cheerleader, because the length she'll go to.
Yeah, because there's something compelling about that sort of that vortex of power. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, you seem to know what you're doing. It, you know, I'm blinded to all your machinations, but okay.
Yeah, and in their economy she's right. If she gets this, then she'll get that. Then she has a chance at this.
Yep.
So why, you know, yes, without minus the murder.
She's kind of right, isn't she? Like,
yeah, minus the murder. Why is it any different than, sorry, that was my phone. Sorry. Why is it any different than if you take crew, you can get to this school, which will get you into Harvard? Why is it any different?
Right. And especially like you said, in Texas, I know in Mississippi, it is a huge thing. There's been more scandals than you could do TV movies about.
Oh man.
And with the football team, things like that, you know, it's just it's a similar type of thing, right? Who's where are you going to go after? You know,
wow. Right.
And it's nuts. And I didn't grow up in that because I went to not very good schools. So it was like, I guess in a way I was blessed because we all came out the same.
Right.
And you know, I didn't have that opportunity.
It's the story as the Full House lady, Aunt Becky, trying to get her daughters into USC. It's the same scheming.
And
exactly.
And I'm kind of, and that blew my mind, because I'm like, at least back in 1993, we thought that a good degree might get you somewhere. And at that point, I was like, you paid how much money to have her get a degree in this economy? Why don't you just give her the money? For God's sakes.
I think she asked for the money, the kid did. Like, just let me be a blogger.
I'm like,
well, and also,
that's the IQ test.
Like the Holly Hunter, that family was kind of using its limited means. Like, she was trying to work with the situation they were in. You know, the Lori, whatever her name is, you're already super privileged.
I know.
Come on.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it all comes back to Full House. We mentioned it last half of the show.
All things do. All things come back to Full House.
I also think it's interesting that we also kind of, at the beginning, once she's told Beau Bridges' character, Terry, that she wants him to find a hitman, everyone, his friends and his brother, her ex-wife, or her ex-husband rather, is saying like, you got to go to the cops because now you've told me it's going to be if something happens, you're in trouble. And which is very, very valid. We have this insane comedy of errors where he tries to go to the police and they're like, hey, it's New Year's Eve. We're not doing this stuff right now. I was like, you mean attempted murder? We're not doing that? And he's like, yeah. Like that whole insane. We also have Andy Richter in his very first role, I think, as one of the police officers or sheriff's deputies. But then he finally gets to where they're like, yeah, okay, let's talk about it. Okay, get her on the phone. Oh, well, she does sound like this could be legitimate. We got to get you wired and get you to a meeting to record her. All of that, I understood his character. But then the more it goes on, there does that greed I mentioned comes up, right? It becomes a little unseemly. Like, is she asking him? Absolutely. Is that wrong? Pretty sure that no matter what religious spectrum you fall on, that's probably not going to get you anywhere nice. And but it starts to feel like they are pushing her, right? Like you do get a little bit of her being led willingly, but being led down this. If he had said, this isn't going to happen, we're done, I'm leaving now, it feels like it might have just ended there. We don't know.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If he had taken leadership in a sense,
like at a certain point,
he was willing to be dissuaded.
Yeah, at a certain point, he wants to keep this going because he's thinking ahead of the curve, right? His brother's going to get the kids. Like we kind of agree with her eventual lawyer's arguments, some of them. And I think it's a really interesting thing because she's definitely in the wrong. Nobody in their right mind, I would argue, would even think about killing a rival cheerleader's, mother and the cheerleader for this kind of thing. But, she gets in a situation where she's allowed to continue on this path where if something had reined her in, which is an interesting thing because, and you also then can bring in the whole gender identity argument with this, right? Well, if she was a guy, what would this, like, maybe he wouldn't have gone to kill someone, but he would have done something else to get them the next step up. And would he have gotten in trouble if he, threatened or had a fist fight versus had to hire someone to kill? It's like, you get in this whole thing where like, how much does her situation, their income, where they live, the family, drive her eventual behavior versus how much is it just, her Lady Macbeth, kind of syndrome for needing that kind of power. I don't know.
I think she's Lady Macbeth. I think she'd be that person, no matter who she was married to. If she were married to the guy in the Aunt Becky case, they would have been doing the exact thing that Aunt Becky did to get her kid into US.
The one argument I would pose against, and not an argument, but the piece of evidence that I found when I was running over my head that maybe be counter is she doesn't do this for her son. She's only doing this for her daughter. So what about the fact that it's her daughter, and we can assume transference to her is causing this? Because she is not helpful or nice to the son at all. She tells him to shut up constantly. And he's basically, saying, at first you're like, well, he wants a truck. I mean, every kid wants something. I wanted things. I usually got them because I was spoiled. But, he just wants a truck. And then you find out, he's like, I want a truck so I can go to college. I need to know how I'm going to get to school every day. And you're like, oh, that's a valid conversation to have. And she's like, get out. I don't want to hear this right now.
Right. Okay. So I have a question on that. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary Jo, were you going to say something?
No, I'm just listening.
So some of it is from transcripts or whatever, but like, we don't know about that stuff. That stuff's just made up. And the same with the cops. So really everyone's a bumbling dumb shit because they're from Texas. Part of that, I was like, somebody's on the ball. They catch criminals in Texas all the time.
Could just be that there's so many of them and they're not very smart. I'm just kidding, Texas. We have fantastic listeners in Texas.
You know what I mean?
Opinion does not reflect my opinion on Texans.
Right, but I think about that a lot. Like, why do they always have to be depicted that way? Some people are on the ball. There's, as I said, everywhere.
Well, I think it's that whole thing of, and I'm at a loss to cite other instances, but that whole Southern modern Gothic or old Gothic of these wild stories that they they capitalize on, and so they fit in these people. I don't even know what I'm saying, but I was wondering that too, like, what is it about that Southern sensibility and capitalizing on the whole over the top Flannery O'Connor idea of these wild characters? And you're right, we don't know, the script doesn't really give us a backstory for Wanda Holloway. I think Holly Hunter is great, but there's no really script information about what drives her to do this.
Right.
Another film might have given her a backstory with her father. You know, he was abusive, and he had affairs all the time, and so she's insecure, and so that we don't know, and that definitely could have been done.
Or or my chances were thwarted. So I mean, she's a stage mother, and you're right. I don't know why it's on the daughter, but there's that whole realm of like mothers and daughters and stage mothers. But yeah,
it's like, it's believable, and I'd watch a whole miniseries on it.
Oh
you know? Like I would eat it up.
The sin and in all of our hearts, all of us. There's not a person on earth that isn't have an inclination to get what they want in any way they can, and that is
right.
There's no getting away from that.
I'm going to live vicariously in a way that I'm not going to go to jail, right? I'm going to watch this. And
How do people do it? I'm going to watch.
Right. Well, and there's the one scene that honestly was creepy. And I mean, I watched some insanely bizarre films and things that have made me feel very uncomfortable in real life and otherwise. Oh. But the scene where it's Holly Hunter laying on a couch in the evening in the living room. Her daughter's at the far end, and then in front of the TV sitting is her son and her son's friend, who's played by a very young Giovanni Ribisi. And I'm extra careful because Mary Jo's here. She's gonna get me. And she's like, and he's like, you know what, I want to kill him. And they have this ugly conversation that I'm sure has happened where he's like, so-and-so, and like, she's a slut. And she's like, no, she's not a slut, she's a tight ass. That's why essentially I want to take her breaks and have her crash her car and die. And you're like, that's an ugly conversation. I'm sure it's happened. It's ugly though. And then that's when Holly Hunter's character tunes in and says, you know who I'd want to kill? And she names the other mother. And she goes, how would you do it? And she asks the friend, who is instantly concerned and like
alarmed.
And her son is like, oh, I'd like put an explosion in a baton. And she's like, that's not realistic. What would you do? And you're just like, oh, this is a weird, like, it just took that 180. And that's of course when they insinuate that she got the idea to have, her rivals killed. But that scene really was chilling because that's such an inhuman, calculating, robotic, turn of fate, right? Or machination in her head. Like, it's like, this is a problem. This can get rid of the problem.
And you're employing young teenagers who are
really, who better to employ than a young teenager?
Well, who are having sort of this cartoony fantasy about, and then I put, dynamite in their shoes and blah, and it does make that huge, that chilling turn. And
it was like, it was a complete blasphemy of what parenthood should be in the perfect sense, right? They're kind of playful. My mom doesn't care if you swear. Oh, really? And then it's like, we're plotting a murder here. I think swearing goes on the back burner. Like, we're just gonna jump the next 30 hurdles to get to that point.
Mom, Mrs. Johnson said some really weird things when I was over watching TV.
Were you talking about killing a classmate? Maybe, it's just that was a chilling scene. I
would have killed that woman for driving the Mercury Grand Marquis. Unexcusable.
So let's talk about the actual. So at the end of the movie, it ends. This movie came out in '93. This all happened in the '90s. So like, or I think it was the '90s, late '80s, somewhere in there. So this is relatively recent. A year before, I think it was ABC. But don't quote me on that, put out another film about the same thing. There's been several.
Oh, right, with like, was it Lindsay Wagner or something? Or
it's like a much more, I think you could argue this film is exploitative, especially when you're talking about the Southern culture. But yeah, it's a much more exploitative one. It's Leslie Ann Warren is
Oh,
in it.
okay.
There's a lot.
I was
There's
close.
a lot of them. I think this is probably the next biggest one though. And it was another TV movie came out the year before. It's called Willing to Kill, the Texas cheerleader
Oh
story.
boy, yeah.
And I love the poster they
watched
put out
that.
for it. It has, yeah, oh yeah, I'm gonna probably watch it after this. It's got like handcuffs and like kill is like in ragged letters. And you know, it's just such a, like I think you mentioned, Mary Jo, it touches something primal in us that we want to watch this kind of exploitation of people's internal work, because it reveals the things that are in us that we don't let show in light very often, hopefully, unless we
Seymour.
are some sort of mad
No,
serial
no,
killer.
go away. Sorry,
Doggy.
my dog is.
It's okay. My
Sorry.
cat pounds at the door, but luckily you can't hear her on her little padded paws.
Mike has
and-
been relatively quiet, so I don't have.
Mike's not patting on the door with his hands. I think that after this movie wraps, there's this a couple of blocks of text. Like we know that the first case, she was sentenced to 15 years, but then it was thrown out because one of the jury members actually was a felon, which is a crazy thing. And then we get an appeal, and that's where the movie ends. And they also give us this weird other information, like there was a tornado in like 1995 or whatever in this community, and Holloway's house wasn't touched at all, but Vern's house lost the trampoline. And I'm like, and it just gives this sort of color, because that is the kind of thing that would be in this movie, and it would be accurate to paint what they want us to see these characters. They also mention that later on, Wanda, the actual person, also veered near her rival's house and hit a Halloween trick-or-treater and threw her onto the lawn.
Oh yeah.
And she was dressed as the prom queen. And I was trying to figure out, like, is this just color, or is this like some sort of implication? She's like, prom queen, my ass. Like, no one's gonna be prom queen but my daughter. Like, I didn't get it. I wasn't sure.
Well, it
That's
felt
what-
very, very Coen Brothers, where
Yeah.
they throw in things either on on the screen, and you're not sure if they're. I'm sure these facts were true, and just thrown in there to underscore the bizarreness of it. But it felt it sort of had that feel to it.
Right. I mean, and then, there was the whole thing of everyone getting paid and getting their, the whole media thing.
Selling their rights.
Yeah, right.
And all that, but still, just having people put your inclinations into on screen, and words in your mouth and thoughts in your head. Oh, it's not that. Yeah, it's a funny movie, but part of me is like, oh, it's already bad enough.
And no one comes out looking that great, right? Like maybe her victim's daughter looks kind of sweet. Like she's like, I feel bad for like them for this situation, and then that's kind of it, right? Like that's the only we really see of her. She's like, oh, it's the simple sweet girl. I'm not even sure it's really something you'd like, but because in the end we get like all of these bits, like everyone who is, even Wanda sometimes watches the TV coverage, and when they're not making fun of her, she seems kind of pleased sometimes. And her daughter is portrayed as like happily scrapbooking like her mom's mugshot in the paper, and like being at school talking about all this stuff and being like, I'm the popular one now because my mom tried to kill people. And then the mother who she
for my kids.
Yeah, it's you're like, oh, this is ugly, and that's kind of what we're left with. Like you said, it's funny, and we're like, haha, but we're also like, ugh. Like that's just, it's also kind of gruesome.
Yeah, like I think she says, won't you do anything for your kids? Like,
And I guess that was the tagline of this particular movie. And one more thing I just want to throw out there. So the director is Michael Ritchie. He did The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy, and he directed Fletch. I know. I was kind of surprised, to be honest, and he directed a horror movie in 1980 called The Island. Which while I enjoyed in some level, I'm not going to say it's a good movie, whereas I would qualify this kind of wholeheartedly as a good film. Like it made me think.
He also did one called Smile about beauty pageants.
He did. And that was before this one, so I think that's where this came from, is they were like, oh, you did Smile.
Yeah, it feels like that.
And whereas the rest of what he did later, I'm sure there's some great stuff in there, but I mean, he did Cops and Robertsons. Like, it seems like sort of entry-level comedy stuff that he did after, which is a shame. Not Not that I want to degrade his entire career, but one thing he also did, he wrote
Yeah,
all the lyrics.
I haven't gotten to do any
Well,
entry-level comedy.
me neither. I mean, I have a reel of my own tapes, but no one wants to watch them. He also wrote the lyrics to all of the music in this movie. This movie has like very Loretta Lynn country, and he wrote all that. And I think it's used very effectively throughout the film. And this might be the only case I've seen where a director has done that.
Michael Myers wrote those poem songs in the last movie. I beg to differ.
Sir.
Whoa, man. I just want to know how he would actually write, whoa, man. Like, how is that phonetically spelled on the page? Like when his collection comes out? Well, we're reaching the end of this segment and this episode. And I want to ask you guys once again, who would you recommend this to and why? Mary Jo Pehl, let's start with you.
I think I might recommend it to aspiring filmmakers because of the narrative structure. I'm not in, you can find your flaws in it, but I thought it was really interesting how they did it.
That's a great, and I think you guys are very into education. I'm super stoked about this. I think that my take would be similar, except I would say even more so to aspiring actors, because I think the characterizations that Holly Hunter and Beau Bridges and even some of the secondary characters give is very strong. And I imagine that many of those are choices they made rather than stuff written into the script, especially with Holly Hunter, with so many of her pacing and her facial expressions and the way she looks at people. It just screams manipulation. Like she looks towards the camera. I've seen people look at me that way, and I start to recognize things, and that's uncomfortable to me, because I realize now that maybe I haven't been, treated truthfully or whatever the case might be.
Sure.
Bridget, we're up to you. Who would you recommend this movie to and why?
I guess just anyone that likes Holly Hunter.
Totally.
You watch those Saving Grace reruns one more time, you just can't do it. So here come the positively true adventures of the alleged Texas cheerleader killing mom. Oh, cheerleader murdering mom. Damn it. I
like
fumbled
good
it in the last 20 yards.
We all do.
Well, I want to once again thank you guys so much. Mary Jo Pehl, Bridget Nelson, thank you guys so much for being on Cult and Classic Podcast.
Thanks, Nate.
Is there anything you guys want to plug to our listenership? Because they're, like me, they're fans. Otherwise, I unfollow them.
I am in the next Mike Myers movie, and I would like everyone to watch it. No, we have right now like you brought it up before, right, MJ? Whatever Happened to Baby Jane?
Baby Jane, yes.
1991 classic. It's on RIFFTRAX right now. You can buy it right now. It is
super worth it. Super worth it. It's essentially Joaquin Phoenix's Joker prequel. I think that you're going to love Vanessa Redgrave having the only British accent in the family. It's super great. No, it really is really funny, and it's also kind of an interesting movie to watch. So I would definitely check it out. It's
fun for Lynn Redgrave. Like, I think she acquits herself nicely. And don't miss Bridget in her salute to Holly Hunter, touring nationally.
Holly Hunter, Holly Hunter, Holly Hunter.
Holly Hunter, Holly, Holly, Holly.
Ale, ale, ale. Thank you guys so much. And to play us out, as always, we have the Chud with All About Evil. I want to let you guys know, as always, that clips are used for review purposes only and are the copyright property of those who own them. Thank you so much. Join us.
Thanks, Nate.
Of course, I am Nate Wyckoff. As I leave you every week, please join our Patreon at patreon.com/cultandclassicpodcast.com. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.